Okay, so Captain Spire, welcome to semi-final JPDU Spring Tournament 2015. Today on Affirmative leg Y, A on negative leg Tokyo B. On the motion, this house of South Africa opposes the use of the Apartheid as an analogy in describing the Israel-Palestine conflict. Before further ado, I'll call upon Prime Minister to open the case within 7 minutes. See you here.
Without any gorgeous intro, let me straight move on to our substantive point. Firstly, I'm going to talk about what kind of stances in South Africa should take. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the history of apartheid, or nature or essence of apartheid. Lastly, I'm going to talk about if this apartheid is going to be analogous to Israel-Palestine problem, why it's going to be empowered that Israel in South Africa is not going to be should not going to be an amicable relationship. It should, or if you prefer, why as South Africa they do not want to empower Israel, and how this policy the Israel-Palestine problem is going to be analogous to apartheid, empowers Israel, and was extremely damaging as a form of national interest of South Africa, and also for the sake of peace for Palestine people in slavery. So first, issue of stance of South Africa. Mr. Speaker, I have 2 points under this. The first point is about the national interest. Firstly, Europe and white people country, especially European country, recognize currently Palestine as a state. They recognize that's a fact, and it is compatible with the interest of Palestine. Mr. Speaker, it's obvious that because Palestine want to have an autonomous and independent state. That's obviously important. That's obviously we cannot deny that. So we think as South Africa, they cannot oppose the stance in which European countries such as Belgium, Netherlands is now taking, because as South Africa, European country is an important trade partner, like the country who are going to be an import for the import country of their resources. So if they are going to be antithetical or they have a different stance with an independent European country, they would lose an amicable tradable partner for the sake for economic prosperous as South Africa. Secondly, we think as a state, South Africa, who had experienced abhorrent injustices under the name of apartheid, they would like to oppose. We would like to oppose Israel as oppressor towards the Palestinian. Any form of oppression is going to be a political evil from the perspective of South Africa, so that they want to stop the Israel oppressing the Palestinian people. Yeah. That is going to be historically compatible, and there was some kind of historical and international stances in which South Africa is going to legitimately having in the status quo. That's a kind of thing in which we recognize that why South Africa should take this stance of opposing for describing apartheid as an analogous of Israel-Palestinian conflict. So second point, history of apartheid, of nature of apartheid. There's many things which we can talk about South Africa, but there's 2 important essence in which South Africa wants to emphasize from their perspective. Firstly, apartheid was a national policy within the domestic sovereignty in South Africa. As a national policy, South Africa had oppressed the blacks from the perspective on the basis of white supremacy. It sends a message, Mr. Speaker, if South Africa recognized Palestine problem and apartheid as the same problem, it will send a message to the international society, especially from towards Israel, that Israel-Palestine conflict is your state policy. There's a state problem in the state national problem, Mr. Speaker. And also the second essence is that in order for geographical segregation, apartheid implemented a quasi-state for the black under, for example, under Homeland Constitution in 1971, for example. It offered a self-ruled government in which Israel is now taking as a rhetoric for describing Palestine, Mr. Speaker. It implies with those two nuances that Palestine cannot be an independent state, but a mere quasi-state like Homeland and Apartheid when they recognize or they show that Israel-Palestine conflict and apartheid as analogous examples, like the conflict based on different races, different religions, for example, and those kind of problems is now considered as a national problem, and therefore the implication of that is that two-state policy in which is favoring to Palestine is theoretically impossible from the perspective of theoretically impossible from the perspective of international society and extremely damaging. Before moving to the third subdown, how Israel is going to be empowered. Yes?
So what's the benefit of two-state solution which you stick to?
But obviously, I think, from the perspective of Palestinian people, they want independent government. They want freedom. They want autonomy. If you deny that, I'm sorry, you're going to have a huge, it is inhumane stance, I believe. So let's substantiate it. So third, how Israel policy is going to be empowered. Pro-Israel, the pro-Israel state would use a rhetoric on their side that apartheid and Israel-Palestine conflict in the way that South Africa apartheid is a domestic problem under sovereign. After South Africa being economically sanctioned, then apartheid was solved. But as Israel, we would say that from the perspective of Israel, with a recommendation of the authorization of South Africa, we would consider Israel-Palestine conflict as a problem under sovereign Israel state, in which we favor to have. Therefore, we don't agree with the concept Palestinian is and can be an independent sovereign state. We would suggest Palestinian as a terrorist would disturb our national security, that strictly champ down for the sake of national security. We would able to legitimize our stance, that legitimate stance as well as assault. That two-state problem is theoretically impossible. Why? Because Palestinian is in the same way, black homeland as a quasi-state. We believe it is impossible to have a two-state solution because again, Palestine is not a state but mere quasi-state. So please go back to my introduction as well as the stance clarified as South Africa. South Africa want to be compatible with the stance in the European country now having. European country prefers South Africa, Palestine to be an independent state. Also, from the perspective of South Africa, they want to, they recognize the importance of autonomy through the combating the oppression. If they, Mr. Speaker, have a stance to empower the Israel, to empower the oppressor, Mr. Speaker, it is extremely damaging as the national interest of South Africa and also for the sake of their past and moral history to be transcended to the next generation. From these reasons, Mr. Speaker, Waseda is extremely proud to propose.
Okay, thank you for Marx. Now call upon leader off to the next case. Here.
Supporting independence of Palestine is not equal to supporting immediate two-state solution right now. We think it's unrealistic. It may be ideal that those two nations exist together. Regarding the context right now, we don't think it's realistic to introduce such radical policy. We think, of course, we do. As South Africa, we oppose this Israel dominantly oppressing those individuals in Palestine. However, we don't think it's only supporting this immediate independence is something realistic in the first place. We think much more we should actively utilize this word of apartheid in order to create a harmony or peace within that area. We think a lot of things can be learned from this experience of apartheid. This is why we think South Africa should support this. I'm going to do basically one thing in my speech. I'm going to explain to you why this active utilization of apartheid as South Africa is in the best interest of South Africa, because it raises this reputation of South Africa through giving a new perspective of how to solve this issue of this conflict. But before that, some rebuttals to the previous speaker. He said in his first argument that South Africa should focus on some EU states because they have economic ties or so forth. Yes, they have economic ties, but there are many nations who deny Palestine right now as a valid state, Mr. Speaker. We also think that we have strong ties with other countries such as that. We don't think we don't understand why they should jump in to one option in the first place, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, other rebuttals will be included. So before moving on to my argument, I'm going to tell you the stance of our side of the house. We are going to utilize the word, as I've told you, to promote promote solution or suggest one solution for the conflict within that. If there is a wrong use of apartheid within the context of the Israel and Palestine conflict, we're happy to rectify that recognition by actively using the word, by giving how we can learn from apartheid, which will be further explained in my argument. So moving on to my issue. So how we can make the reputation or this interest of South Africa go better is through proposing one way of solving it. For example, the reason why Japan is as the only country in the world which got nuclear bomb is actively promoting this anti-nuclear movement is because through this they can have this experience shared with other countries, and therefore to have a unique role within the international society that empowers Japan as a whole. On the other hand, if we talk about South Africa, AU is South Africa is acting as a leader of African Union, which leads to being seen as one important actor within the international context. We think it's important for South Africa to cut into the power dominating US, for example, or other countries dominating such international sphere, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, we think it's very important. And how is this supporting or actively using apartheid going to make that realized? We think the uniqueness here is that there is we think that there is a responsibility for South Africa to utilize their own experience to solve other issues as well, Mr. Speaker. They have the direct documents or people's voices or these recordings which actually led to how the apartheid was solved. For example, they created this TRC in order to have those both actors, black and white, in order to go reconcile, even if they used to have this kind of hatred. No, thank you. So, what we can talk about, apartheid, they said the essence of it is a national policy or quasi-state or so forth. Yes, we recognize it is true, right? But however, Mr. Speaker, we don't have to we don't have to necessarily emphasize those two things in order to promote a solution for the Israel or Palestinian things, right? They can just have a neutral stance towards saying that Israel is the only legitimate actor or so forth, but at the same time utilizing other factors within apartheid, the experience of apartheid, and the things we can learn or we can utilize are in two ways. Firstly, by acting to the mentality of the actual Israel and Palestine people, by telling them that they do not necessarily have to hate each other. And secondly, by acting to the international society, by saying that you guys, we should be together in order to oppose this kind of conflict. What do I mean by this? Firstly, about the mentality of Israel-Palestinian people. One important factor of apartheid, or the context of apartheid, is that those third actor actually created this conflict, right? When those British people or those Western people actually sent in white people within South Africa, what happened was that they didn't try to make policies to reconcile those individuals within the black people, but actually segregated each other so that nothing happens within them. Within such context, Mr. Speaker, it is, the conclusion here is that it's not like necessarily like inherent in the existence of black and white that causes conflict. It is only the way how the policy or the state creates this harmony within these individuals. We've already seen many cases, for example, in India, like people are not actually having this apartheid, or because because how those imperial states created them is that like they didn't really have this very strong policy to like split them with each other, Mr. Speaker. What the conclusion here is that South Africa can utilize this apartheid by telling those Palestinian or Israel people that you don't have to necessarily like act against each other, or like you shouldn't blame the third actor and just like go against each other. You guys have to work on the policy in order to reconcile with each other. We think these kind of messages can work greatly when South Africa actively promotes this use of apartheid in the right way. Before moving on, yes.
All assumption coming from you is this rhetoric lead to better consequence in this Israel-Palestine program. We say this rhetoric lead to bad consequence to solve this problem. How do you read better consequence in your paradigm?
We don't think it's a necessity for a burden for us to completely solve the issue. We think it's the responsibility of South Africa to utilize their own experiences to create one valid choice or solution to solve the conflict in the Middle East, Mr. Speaker. The second uniqueness here is that international society can be changed. How? The context of apartheid, or how apartheid was abolished, is through like very long decades of UN as a whole trying to sanction South Africa, trying to condemn South Africa for its own actions. And eventually, because United Nations or international society worked together to oppose this apartheid, they actually ended this oppression. Mr. Speaker, right now, United States or like other arbitrary actors are supporting one side, Israel, for example, in order to create a benefit for their own countries. We think these kind of situations can be condemned through South Africa actively saying that international society should be one in order to create a peace within that nation, not thinking about their own self-interest, but rather about what the best solution as a whole, as an international society. We think, Mr. Speaker. So therefore, like South Africa has this unique responsibility to utilize this experience to work to propose a unique solution towards Israel-Palestine. This is why we propose this proposal.
Okay, thank you. Remarks, continue case of government call contact Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the way of the solution that has propagated by the opposition side, TRC, the ICJ, is based on the context of the state and the state. But these kind of apartheid actually degrade these kind of Palestinian area as a quasi-state, and it has put the difficulty on the negotiation table, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. These kind of imbalances, promoting the imbalances, actually put the difficulty on the negotiation, the equal negotiation, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. You may solve the problem, but the situation is more worse and more jeopardizing on the shoulder of the Palestinian people. That's why we have to propose this motion. First substantive, I want to talk about the way of the solving by the apartheid. Why this kind of the nuance of the apartheid is to put the difficulty on the negotiation by the state, and why this is completely harmful on the shoulder of the Palestinian people. Before moving on to my argument, some rebuttal to the opposition side. Opposition side to promote integration, we use apartheid, the word of the apartheid. Two responses. Firstly, there is no exclusivity at all. The burden of the proof of their side of the House is why the word is uniquely important. Even if we do not use the word itself, you can learn the history. If this kind of history of the apartheid is fundamentally important, even if that's why they never ever support from the start the word of the apartheid is completely useful or not, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. And they say using apartheid may quickly solve the problem, but we have to say the problem may be solved, that the consequence is more severe than the status quo. That's why the consequences more should be prioritized, and we have to oppose on that point. And secondly, they say that they somewhat opposing the two-state solution. Power imbalances is actually matter. England has more power than the Scotland. The Spanish has more power than the Basque. That's why England should conquer, the Spanish conquer the Basque. This kind of the feasibility is completely harmful and morally abhorrent. Okay, moving on to my first substantive. Why this kind of nuance is completely jeopardizing the shoulder of the Palestinian people. Before moving on to, yes.
If you apply the experience from apartheid to the issue of Israel-Palestine, isn't that like making apartheid and Israel-Palestine conflict analogy?
Why you have to push the, you say the word it says actively, Mr. Speaker. And there's a huge difference between this on the usage of the word, and why this kind of the word is completely jeopardized. That is the history. You have to learn the history. Actually, this kind of the apartheid, the white people, the majority white people, actually granted a small autonomy or quasi state on the shoulder of the minority people. Bans of autonomy proportion, the bans the homeland constitution is actually white is a superior state and black is inferior. That's why we have granted the quasi state and we have more sovereignty over the shoulder of the youth. This kind of the context should be recognized, and the meaning of the apartheid is exactly that I mean, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the connotation of the apartheid itself is the Jewish state. The Palestinian is not the state. This kind of the nuance is completely included by the usage of the word itself, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. That's why if the state vs state, the two states, these kind of the other states can intervene, can actively military intervene, because this is a problem of the state, and we can, international society, recognize, we can use the TRT, we can use the ICJ on our side of the house. This is the beauty of the policy, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. But in their side of the house, the state vs the quasi state is actually put the difficulty on the shoulder of the external effect, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, because we have Israel has the superiority of the autonomy, jurisdiction, administration, the political decision should be based on our nation, and no one should not be intervening on our state. This kind of rhetoric is completely used by the Israeli people, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. This is completely problematic. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, because these kind of Israeli people have used the rhetoric that we are the recognized one, you are not recognized one, you are the quasi state, and that's why we have more superiority, more power over these kind of the Palestinian people. This kind of rhetoric usually recognized the international society, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. This kind of situation is completely harmful. Specifically, why we say this is completely harmful? Because they are highly likely, the incentive of the mindset of the Israeli people is to exterminate the Palestinian people. You look at the reality, this kind of the Israeli people is actually attacking and aggressive on the shoulder of these kind of Palestinian people. They may propose we have to respect the Israeli people, but not the Palestinian people. We can actually deprive the right to vote. We can actually reduce the welfare. We can actually reduce these kind of old people, those who are living in the quasi state, because we have a superior, and this kind of tangible harm on the shoulder of the Palestinian people is easily happen, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Then the beauty of our policy is if these kind of things will occur now in the status quo is separated, US can, or the EU can intervene to some extent. We can do the economic sanction because this is a state vs state, and someone should intervene with it, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. But after taking on proposal and this kind of promotion of the the usage and the word, the usage of the apartheid is used, there is a more less and less likely for the other state to intervene with the internal problem of the Israel, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, a good example is here the Tibetan problem is completely prohibited by China to not to intervene with it, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, recognizing that these kind of the external effect is fundamentally necessary when you're talking about so complex situation like the two states like this, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why we have to resort to the external power because the internal power is not enough to solve the problem recognizing the station. That's why this kind of antithetical policy with the including the outer power is fundamentally make it difficult and the consequences maybe. But that's why we have to propose this motion.
Thanks for your remarks. Continue case of opposition and co-founded to your leader.
Mr. Speaker, it is beautiful if the Israel and Palestine conflict does solve. But we don't think this policy is necessary about solving the entire conflict. We believe this policy is rather about increasing the recognition of the South African nation. It's about the interest of South African nation. They have gave us many numbers of analysis how their policy might solve the Israel and Palestine conflict, but we don't necessarily understand what is necessarily going to lead to fall down to the South African interest at the end of the day. What we believe on our side of the house that yes, our suggestion might not be absolute, but we believe that opposing a certain suggestion to the international society is eventually going to lead to the interest of South African nation by increasing the national identity and international recognition. After dealing with the independent rebuttals, I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. First of all, two constructive speakers coming from that side of the house stick to the idea that look, because this was a national policy, because Apartheid was national policy, suddenly the international society is going to ignore the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm going to talk about why that's not the case. Second of all, even if that does occur, I'm going to compare the values on each side of the house. I'm going to talk about why, even if Apartheid might be even if a part of apartheid might be contradicting to the Israel-Palestine conflict, why still we believe this policy is beneficial for the South African nation? Independent rebuttals first. First of all, the Prime Minister mentioned that when we say that this is apartheid, it's going to empower Israel because we want to recognize that Israel and Palestine is the same single state. I have several responses here. So, Mr. Speaker, to begin with, we believe that two-state solution is idealistic, but we believe the international society has already recognized this is something really unrealistic. Because we believe that after many kinds of negotiations throughout the history, we have recognized that two-state solution is kind of difficult because Israel is never willing to compromise the land for the Palestine people because they have their own identity, because they have their own national identity. We believe it is something really unrealistic to begin with. So given that the international society regards two-state solution as unrealistic, what happens if South Africa suddenly says that let's do two-state solution? We believe rather the international society is going to think that they're trying to suggest something, some sort of really unrealistic policy without even having any reasons behind that logic. So we believe it's rather regressive for the South African nation. Second of all, they also talked about how, they then said, Deputy Prime Minister responded to our case saying that, look, this integration issue is not something is not mutually exclusive, they can do it on that side of the house. First of all, they have already conceded to the point that the integrating or communication or cohesion between the Israel and Palestine people are something beneficial and something that we should pursue. We believe that they are already principally conceding to our side of the house. Second of all, we also told you that there are many exclusive things that South African nation can do. We told you from talking about how there are many resources, how there are many testimony, how we have many we have many voices that only South African nation can provide. They have to tell us, and like in terms of exclusivity, we also believe that they haven't proven that as well. I don't think that's important in this debate. Before moving on, take up your while.
Europe preferred two-state solution by recognizing the independent Palestine as a state. Don't you think South Africa taking a stance and say we prefer states as well, which is independent state, compatible with their national interest?
Okay, even if that is the case, I'm going to talk about in my second substantive why that is not necessarily going to damage the interest of South African nation. Okay, so moving on to the first issue about this national policy thing. So the entire contention coming from that side of the house is that because South Africa, because the solution to apartheid was a national policy, the international society is going to simplify that, look, Israel-Palestine conflict is also a national policy, we're never going to intervene. I have like many responses here. First of all, Mr. Speaker, we don't think South African nation was something that was solely based on an internal change. Already, historically speaking, Mr. Speaker, the international society has been imposing economic sanctions towards the South African nations on years and years, and that led to international South African leaders to introduce apartheid at the end of the day. We believe same applies here. The international society believes that now Israel and Palestine conflict is not something that we can solve. As long as we say that, look, as long as we do take a long time imposing a certain sanction, as long as we try hard for a very long time, we can send a message to the international society that, look, Israel-Palestine conflict is something, we have a solution, we can solve it, it's not something that is utopia. But second of all, we also tell that they're simplifying, we believe it is also simplifying the problem of apartheid, because we believe that yes, it was a national policy, but it's also about a regional conflict, or it's also about a conflict between identity, race versus race. We believe that society is not so simple to just simplify. It was a nation policy, or it's a nation policy as well. It's also about conflict between identity and identity. We believe it's applicable to the Israel-Palestine conflict. It is about religious conflict as well. We don't think that kind of simplified mechanism is going to occur. But second of all, the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned that, look, international society is going to suddenly ignore because it's a national policy. And because it's one state, we cannot intervene. Well, we have many examples where international society intervened into the sovereignty. For instance, the Yugoslavia conflict was obviously a problem of sovereignty, but still, the international society has stepped in at the end of the day. The problem of ISIS, problem of Somalia, problem of like rogue states, everything, in every occasion, the international society has stepped in and ignored the sovereignty. Because they do have moral responsibility, because when the state is not taking responsibility to protect its citizens, international society is already incentivized to step into a certain state. We don't think that is a thing. Moreover, we believe that making a state versus state conflict rather disincentivize the international society to step in. Because now they can say, that, look, each state have their own power, each state have their own recognition, so there is no necessity for our help. We believe those kind of measures rather work on that side of the house, so we believe there's going to be less incentive for the international step in rather under their policy. So if they want to increase international support for the Israel-Palestine conflict, we tell you this, their policy is regressive. Moving on to the comparison of the national interest of South Africa. So the only benefit coming from their side of the house was a trade between South Africa and European nations. We already told you from the beginning that not all states are supporting two-state solution to begin with. But second of all, even if that was the case, let's say England was supporting two-state solution and South Africa was not. Even if South Africa said explicitly, we don't understand why England will suddenly cut the economical trade with South Africa to begin with. Because there are benefits that England do gain from the South Africans for importing resources. We don't think that is going to be there. But on the other hand, we have exclusive benefit on our side of the house. Because first of all, we told you how South Africa can pose a suggestion to the international society as well. We also told you how this policy is going to benefit the national identity of the domestic sphere as well. Because now by saying that, look, we have override of conflicts such as something that is similar to that Israel-Palestine conflict, they can be proud of their history that they have override such a really disastrous conflict. Even this is extremely important, especially when the social security in South Africa is still unstable to a certain extent. By facilitating this certain national identity, we rather believe that we can prevent these kind of unstable situations in South Africa, and we believe that best fits the interests of South Africa. Thus, we oppose.
Thank you for remarks. Continuing case of government, I'll call upon Government Whip. Here.
Mr. Speaker, South Africa say Israel-Palestine program is same as apartheid. Under that circumstance, what kind of interpretation would happen for Israeli people? Israeli people say, if it's same as apartheid, this is a program of national program. It's actually support current Netanyahu government, what Netanyahu government say. Israel people say, this is a national program, other states should not intervene, other sovereign states, we should decide this program. This kind, if South Africa, this is the same as apartheid, South Africa directly support what Netanyahu said. We say this is fundamentally harmful. Why is that so? Because the people, for example, in the United States, some people is swaying, still Israel is good, Israel is bad, but under this circumstance, right-wing the people utilize these remarks. Oh, let's like South Africa support what Israel say. Oh, the keeping the status quo, which means other United States support Israel is a good thing. In the United States, the more people easily can think that this kind of mechanism we are talking about. What's the mechanism they are talking about? If South Africa say, oh, it's same as this program is the same as apartheid, so maybe other states start to think, oh, in apartheid we can solve this program by economic sanction. We need to do same things. Is it fundamentally unrealistic? This kind of persuasion never happened under apartheid because United States has veto. That's why the United under their paradigm. So this kind of let's make sanctions. This kind of remarks does not make any effect. But on the contrary, in our side, Israel has a massive incentive to utilize this rhetoric to support what Netanyahu said. This is a harm coming from in the status quo. As South Africa has a relationship with European country. In fact, many European countries support and recognize Palestine as a state. Then, Mr. Speaker, under our paradigm, Israel, South Africa can follow what European people want to prefer. No, thank you. Under that circumstance, we can achieve the more beneficial for South Africa. Having said that, I'm going to deal with two issues in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to examine what South Africa should do. Secondly, effect of this analogy of apartheid. But before that, I want to engage what previous speakers have said. Previous speakers say benefit of South Africa is the people on South Africa can have pride. If it's the same as apartheid, the South African people can get pride. Why? So from the beginning, I could not get reasons. More importantly, these in the status quo problem within South Africa already solved. What's the necessity to exaggerate, to support Netanyahu to solve this problem? We have many alternative ways to tackle on this problem. This kind, if income gap program, we are maybe the progress taxation, there can be the solution and so forth. Why does this kind support Netanyahu is necessary? No exclusive reason coming from the other side. So moving on to the first point, what South Africa should do. We say South Africa should follow what European countries say. Because at the end of the day, it leads to the more benefit to these people. Why is that so? Because at the end of the day, South Africa can get more better connection within European country or get aid from European country. For example, in Japan actually require developing country, please support hunting whale. So this exchange of getting vote in international whale organization, Japan provide aid many developing country. Same kind of things would happen to South Africa. If South Africa oppose this rhetoric, which means that South Africa can say that this program is not, the Israel-Palestine program is not national program, it's an international program, which is actually same idea which European country has. Then South Africa can argue, I can more possibility to get developmental aid from the more investment from European country. As I said before, Japan already takes this kind of stance in order to get both international world organizations. Same kind of things in our side comparatively happen. This kind of exclusive benefit that coming from our side. They say South Africa should use their experience to show, to solve this kind of problem and so forth. Example coming from the other side was nuclear power plant. Japan gets accident of nuclear power plant, then Japan should utilize these kind of things. But it's still controversial issue. In our, as you know, in our years, the JPDU Grand Final Debate motion was this kind of issue. It's a still controversial issue. Why does use this experience can be beneficial for other countries? No explanation coming from our side. But we proved this support this rhetoric actually harm to these Palestinian people. It's actually against what European people say. That's why we, as a South Africa, we should not use rhetoric from the beginning. Secondly, he said that in the South Africa we use TRC and so forth. I'm sorry, the cousin actually misunderstood what TRC. Please forget what cousin said. No, thank you. But never mind. We say that if they use, in South Africa we can use TRC. Yes.
So you said sanction, like US will never change even if South Africa says anything. If you neglect the influence of South Africa's message, doesn't that like also deny that people will believe it's a national problem?
So as I said before, if the South Africa supports Benjamin Netanyahu, under that circumstance, for example, United States conservative media pick and choose this rhetoric, South Africa actually supporting Israel, so let's follow this logic. This kind of persuasion happens more in outside, the more Israel happens. The people support Palestinian can get excuse, can get legitimacy to support Israel because South Africa actually support what Netanyahu said. This kind of excuse, this kind of legitimacy actually empower Netanyahu. This is exclusive harm coming from our side. So keep on our side. TRC, if Israel starts to say let's use TRC, which means let's treat this program as national program, not international program. If Israel say this program deal with in ICJ, it's an international program.
Sure.
Other country can intervene it. Important point is European country prefer two-state solution, which means that if they use analogy of TRC, this Palestinian recognize this is a national program, then we cannot intervene it. It's a harmful to Palestinian people. We propose.
Thank you very much. Continuing the next case, I call upon position of here.
Mr. Chair, given that the goal of both sides is to contribute national interest of South Africa, the thing is, which stance of South Africa would be seen as rational and reasonable suggest to Israel-Palestine conflict. The reason why I hate IR motion is the opponent team came up with magical solution to the conflict. Today, same thing happened. They support two-state solution. They can divide the Israel and Palestine into two states, and they can suddenly guarantee the independence of Palestine. This thing is actually not true from the reality speaker. How two-state solution is unrealistic is already provided by partner. Israel people colonize many people and many areas actually in Palestine. They cannot divide into two states actually in society. Even though international community agree with, we have to protect some independence, autonomy of Palestine. It doesn't suddenly mean that you have to protect or you have to pursue two-state solution. We have to find how to protect autonomy of Palestine government, the Palestine people's view, and Israel people's view. We say it's the actual realistic policy we have to see on our side. So my summary is basically one, which side is better for Israel and Palestine problem, and that's why. And the reason why if you summarize by this way is that's because how the South Africa will be seen as rational and reasonable actor in the international side. Their assumption is if you use the apartheid as an analogy in describing the Israel-Palestine conflict, the international community misunderstands that Israel-Palestine conflict and apartheid is exactly same, Mr. Speaker. We say it's actually not true, right? Yeah. Even though we use the rhetoric, we shouldn't repeat the World War II to prevent World War III. We don't oppose anything which happens in the World War II. For example, if the League of Nations fail, we create another United Nations to protect the security of international security. Even though we learn something from the past, it doesn't mean we have to reflect everything in the past or everything we explained in the past. For example, they told us maybe in the apartheid, the South African in Africa, the Quasi Island is somehow invaded or somehow mistreated by the South African. If that is a failure of apartheid, we can learn also the experience from using apartheid, what's happening in apartheid. So in this time, we have to do something different in case of Israel-Palestine conflict. Their burden is how using the analogy is actually going to the same thing. Or for example, if you use national policy as the analogy in describing the international conflict, how this international community suddenly misunderstand its national policy or one-state policy in Israel-Palestine. We say even though actually they characterize international community already recognize the importance to admit the independence or autonomy of Palestine government, we don't think the international community will suddenly misunderstand that using apartheid means you have to stick to the one-state solution or you have to prioritize Israel interest over Palestine interest. That's why we think even though we're using the analogy of apartheid, we think that kind of one-state policy or national policies, that kind of misunderstanding is never happening in our side. Yes.
So in our paradigm, pro-Palestinian people can get more persuasion because in our side, these pro-Palestinian people use this analogy as a rhetoric. South Africa support us. South Africa give legitimacy to us. This kind of increasing persuasion is a program because at the end of the day, more people start to support what Netanyahu says antithetical to peace of this conflict zone.
Why Israel become white and Palestine become black in case of Israel-Palestine conflict? Then we see the conflict of two independent actors, which is actually seen as important thing by the international community. We don't think we have to prioritize Israel because Israel is saying similar to the white in the South African nations. We think that kind of thing never happened in our side of the house. They say simply supporting independence of Palestine from by using the apartheid, maybe opposing the independence on Palestine. We think is not true, right? Even though we support our use of apartheid as an analogy, we don't deny the independence or autonomy of Palestine. We have to seek another solutions, how to prioritize, how to balance out the two interests between Israel and Palestine. I don't know, or I cannot provide the magical solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Even the professors cannot do that. But we think actually we can learn something from the apartheid, Mr. Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister already told you we have to learn the experience of apartheid. Then they say, or we don't have to use the wording of apartheid. I believe is the necessity or meaning of using apartheid as an analogy of experience in the past. We think if we believe is that fact, we can utilize some experience of apartheid. It's more beneficial to utilize the apartheid as wording because we can learn more from the apartheid. When you oppose apartheid as an analogy, you cannot learn anything because it's different from Palestine to Palestine, Israel to South African. We think if you want meaningful experience, utilization, our policy is much better.
So
yes.
Experience coming from apartheid, like TRC and so forth, prove what Netanyahu say is true. Because Netanyahu say it's national program, it's not international program, it's antithetical what European people try to say. European people try to solve this program as international program. How do you respond?
You say that international community says it's not one-state solution. The international community oppose the sentiment or statement of Netanyahu to say it's one-state problem. You say actually mixing the international context and the experience of apartheid is much better compared to their side. And finally, say regarding that, they say that our policy legitimize that what Netanyahu are saying, that they refuse the other international actors to come into the problem in our side. But we think rather it's opposite, right? In what happens in Apartheid is actually international actor, external actor intervene into the South Africa and actually economically sanctions South Africa and won't try to change the situation of South Africa. We think that our rhetoric is can send a message. We have to pressure Israel rather than to be friendly with Israel in our side of the house, because now US is friendly to the Israel, but it's not actually happening in the South African problem, Mr. Speaker. That's why our policy is much better to pressurize Israel to change the policy in those ways in a very country approach.
From our talks, in case of call, we will opt to the party here.
What does it mean to use the word apartheid as an analogy describing this Israel-Palestine conflict? It means that we don't say it's totally like same. They have similar points, right? We're telling you that they have to say that they oppose any kind of like utilizing the apartheid itself at any element in order to explain what's happening between Israel and Palestine. We do not support like a way of using apartheid by explaining that Israel is a nation, Palestine is not a nation. We support a world where the usage of apartheid as an analogy to say that this problem is not something solvable by leaving them alone within within themselves. Rather, the international community should act as one. We think this is something, a clear model or support the world we're going to support on our side of the house. So based on this, I'm basically simply going to compare the harms and benefits of taking this proposal. The benefits they tried to explain to us are basically three. Firstly, they said they can get aid from EU states. And secondly, they said, well, like they're going to delegitimize what Netanyahu said within Israel. And thirdly, they said international society will not abandon Israel-Palestine because of this motion. All right, let's deal with this one by one. By talking about EU states, there's like two responses here. Like we already told you that there are many nations that actually do not like recognize that two-state solution is okay. Therefore, like we do not necessarily see the uniqueness of like getting money from EU in the first place. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, like comparing the value that we want to protect, I'm going to mention this further. This like responsibility that responsibility of South Africa as the only nation who experienced this massive oppression is something unique to South Africa. As I've already told you, like getting aid from some countries is not unique. It's replaceable by like getting by exploring other ways to get money. Right? We don't think that value that they want to protect, this monetary incentive, is something like better than the value that we want to protect on our side of the house, which is like accomplishing the duty that they have, South Africa uniquely has, Mr. Speaker. So, and secondly, they tried to say, like giving legitimacy to the people on the ground. Like we didn't quite understand like that, the mutual exclusivity of that, right? We already see in cases when Netanyahu tried to legitimize himself by saying that they're like already propagating how Palestinian people are like very wrong and how like the people within Israel should support him. Like we didn't quite understand how like, especially when they denied the power of like South Africa like proposing one. Giving a message to the world, like we didn't quite understand the difference between the world they support and we support. Yeah. And the final thing is that international abandonment. We give you plenty of reasonings why that's like really unrealistic, right? We don't like necessarily say that like just because like some countries like Russia or so forth is saying China is Tibetan problem is a Chinese national thing. The international society still thinks that it's not like just like one problem that China only has the sovereignty of. Right? We didn't quite get the logic of their problem. So moving on to our issue, like how it is very important to utilize this. Like the context right now is the world is like sort of giving up on the issue of Israel and Palestine. Like they already don't try to like reconcile those two actors, but like every time one leader tries to reconcile, he's getting assassinated, like Rabin or so forth. Like these kind of things are getting this mood of international society. What as uniquely as South Africa we can do is propose this new solution or new view of the world, how to deal with this issue. We already gave you plenty of reasons why we can learn from this experience of apartheid, especially when like UN as a whole like try to sanction this individual. We think these kind of new views are something that fits the responsibility of South Africa as a nation. This is why we oppose this proposal.
Thank you very much. To close this round, call upon Prime Minister to give his reply speech. Here.
I feel that the kind of national interest, like explained by opposition, to say, South Africa can gain attention from international community, and South African people can get pride, because they can have a say in international society that's increased in national pride, so on and so forth. That's very ambiguous. What we want to achieve on our side is that we do not want South Africa to make angry of their friend, enemy of their friend. That's the kind of interest that we have to talk about, which was specify that in terms of economic interest as well as the stances and by reflection of past history. So those kind of things will be clarified in my reply by looking at two things. Firstly, I'm going to look at how their benefit is ambiguous and why our benefit is quite clear. Secondly, I'm going to talk about what is the national interest by South Africa, in which they didn't necessarily grasp the nuance in which I think PM was the most clear and understandable speaker in this round. Deserved the best speaker of the round of semi-final. But the first, utilization. Takuma said, we want to utilize history by Israel and Palestine, by saying apartheid as a symbol of harmony. The fact of sanctions may solve the problem. We want a mentality for peace, so on and so forth, to overcome conflict. No mechanism, unfortunately, for how people to become more harmonious by reference to the interest of Israel and Palestine to begin with. And furthermore, in terms of sanctions, Mr. Speaker, Uchiyama had cut the logic, how it is impossible under their side, as long how much they have South Africa strongly appeal to international society, we want sanctions, so on and so forth. USA would veto that simply as a power of having a huge sanction. What we want to achieve as PRO is that we want to avoid an enemy or the friend of South Africa to be empowered and become belligerent. Israel, under your side, Israel would utilize this analogy and you legitimize their stance by picking and choosing the essence of that analogy. That's the point. That's the precise point that we want to recognize in the debate. That's why Prime Minister was shining in the debate. You know what? And also, by utilizing essence, what do we really mean by this? By enhancing the apartheid within analogy as one nation problem. It shut down the possibility for ICC, and also peaceful and equal negotiation between Palestine and Israel, in which Palestine people wants to have, Mr. Speaker, and also they had not negated our characterization about South Africa as a state who had experienced an oppression. They do not want to be other states to be oppressed again. Those kind of stances is more likely to consistent because peaceful negotiation means there's no oppressive relationship between Palestine and Israel. If Israel is going to empower to negate the peaceful and bilateral negotiation, that's immensely antithetical to the national interest of South Africa to begin with. Second, in terms of national interest, we have told you economic interest as well as the stance based on history that opposes to oppression is going to be damaged by the very analogy in which apartheid and Israel and Palestine conflict become analogous. And also, Mabuchi had said, we want a world in which Israel-Palestine problem has overcome in the same way as apartheid and in the same way that apartheid had overcome. That implied that those conflicts has overcome as a form of national one-state policy. If, Mr. Speaker, they didn't agree, Mr. Speaker, they didn't contest that being a quasi-state, being not recognized as an independent state is a form of oppression from the perspective of Palestinians, that's immensely be antithetical to the interests of South Africa as well as this Palestinian. Mr. Speaker, the only source that you have to make a decision is a floor of Prime Minister, because that was the most clearest piece, clearest benefit in which the side proposition is going to have win with a thresh margin. See you again in the joint panel.
Thanks for your remarks. No, it's over. Thanks for cooperation. Cross the table and shake hands.